In this presentation, we are going to be speaking about gender, exploring how negative gender bias could have contributed to the case study complaint. These are our aims.
There are several definitions as to what gender bias is, and the second definition here puts it into context. In the case study, the clinical team leader is an experienced man, whereas the paramedic is a younger, less experienced woman. It's widely reported across professions that women have a harder time advancing in the workplace than men. It's been noted that in 2014, only 4.6% of CEOs from Fortune 500 companies were women, and in 2018, Wagner reports this as 4.8%. This is also evident in healthcare, as Arrizabalaga et al. Report the leaky pipeline phenomenon, consisting of a disproportionately low number of women achieving leading medical positions in Barcelona. They say after a completion of specialist training, the proportion of women with temporary contracts more than double that of men, but less than 50% of women achieve permanent positions compared with 70% of men. This translates to the UK, as statistics from NHS employers show that despite there being more women in junior roles, it's more men that progress. A similar trend was reported by Mason, saying that only a quarter of Canadian paramedics are female, and less than 5% of women take up leadership positions. Although not all these figures are specific to paramedicine, this could suggest that women either aren't good enough to progress, or there could be another reason they have a harder time advancing. Addressing the latter, Myers says that reasons for lack of women's advancement in healthcare include demands of clinical practice, family obligations, and lack of mentoring. And Timberlake says this is down to inability to access social capital, resources, and networks that are essential for career development and maturation. However, Heilman says there is a disparity between what people think women are like versus traits necessary to work in specific fields, i.e., there is a stereotype-held belief that women are incompetent. Allen points out that the 2016 American presidential election highlighted the difference in standards for male and female leaders. They say Hillary Clinton was scrutinized for every aspect of her appearance, and that her opponents carefully questioned her health, stamina, presidential look, and lack of broad shoulders, as coded comments about her gender. Again, when looking specifically at developmental work experiences and challenges to promotion, King et al. State the results are suggestive of benevolent sexism, which is stereotype-based beliefs that women should be protected. They conclude that this practice may limit women's exposure to challenging assignments, which in turn may partially explain the underrepresentation of women at the highest level of organisations. Similarly, Perrett suggested that in an Australian fire service, there was the notion that women were employed as tokens rather than for their abilities, and that they were often seen as in a never quite there bind that challenges their ability to progress into leadership roles within the service. Another study into whether gender affects safety in firefighters found that women were often left out of discussions on improving the fire service, and also concluded that having these conversations was in itself a palpably cathartic experience. This suggests that experiences of negative gender bias are often not talked about, despite their prevalence, and this could be another barrier to overcoming it. A product of gender bias in the workplace is the gender pay gap, which measures the differences in wages earned by female workers when compared with male workers. This is certainly ongoing within healthcare, studied and supported by many articles. As the dates of these articles show, this is a current issue that still needs to be overcome. UK ambulance services are not immune, and the London Ambulance Service have published their own gender pay report. In this, they reveal a 4.5% mean hourly rate pay gap and a 31.59% mean bonus pay gap. Alsberg et al. Say that in Western culture, the pay gap likely persists because both men and women consider somewhat lower earnings for female employees to be fair.
The name Hanan comes from the Middle Eastern meaning of mercy or compassion. The culture within the Middle East towards gender and gender bias is different to that of the Western culture. Furthermore, there are pay gaps within different cultures. In Middle Eastern countries, the gender pay gap is not perceived as an issue, as the largely conservative societies tend to believe that women should not be working as much as men, or they cannot do the difficult jobs like their male counterparts. Therefore, it is believed women should expect lower pay. This cultural ideology could lead to an entrenched belief of men being superior leader figures who deserve to earn more. Within some Middle Eastern countries, the law still prohibits women undertaking certain roles and day-to-day jobs without first asking their husbands or the head of the household permission. This suggests that many families may still hold this traditional view, discouraging women taking jobs, especially a job seen as a man's job. There is a significant difference with the number of qualified male to female paramedics, as the figures show on the screen. It is still very much a male majority job. Whilst it is clearly not discouraged the female paramedic in this case taking up the role, her values from her upbringing may affect how she communicates with other males within the ambulance service and how she discusses any differences of opinion. This in turn could affect the ability for her to challenge authority on a disagreement with Peter. Within the LAS, women only make up 31.9% of senior management posts in 2013, This could lead to similar issues with women struggling to stand up against the male-dominated leadership. Within Western culture, female managers are less likely to experience job satisfaction than men due to pay gaps, less autonomy and lower status. Although Western culture still exhibits the view of women having the domestic role within society, this is becoming more outdated generationally, especially when compared with the Middle Eastern culture. This could lead us to believe that if the female paramedic had grown up and socialised in a Western country, she may not have had this ingrained deference to a male leader.
In the NHS, the vast majority of people in leadership roles are men. A gender bias can have a negative effect on, especially when working in a team. Effective communication is broken down and can lead to negative outcomes and an inability to resolve issues. The male clinical lead, Peter, disregarded the wishes of the patient's sister and the actions of the female paramedic. The female paramedics do not challenge Peter, and this is a prevalent problem in the NHS where staff don't challenge senior authority. The BMJ states the following. Teamwork is an exceedingly important part of healthcare, especially where people's lives are at risk. Gender biases such as sex views and a lack of respect for co-workers can greatly hinder a team's effectiveness. In the case study, it is clear that Peter had no interest in what the female paramedics had to add. This shows a lack of respect and thus a breakdown of teamwork. A loss of effective teamwork in healthcare is dangerous for patients. Hopkins Medicine states that more than 250,000 deaths per year are due to medical errors in the US. Paramedics have an extremely stressful job, causing high rates of depression, anxiety and suicide. Stress and gender bias have similar effects on the ability for a paramedic to do their job. In the case study, one of the major causes for the breakdown of communication was likely to be caused by stress. Peter is shown to have a history of stress-related health issues. And with the difficulty of speaking to the patient, this may have exacerbated the already stressful situation.
From a scientific viewpoint, men and women tend to react differently with stress, both psychologically and biologically. During stress, the levels of oxytocin produced by women increases, and what's more, the female hormone estrogen enhances the effect of oxytocin. Valstad et al. Conducted a meta-analysis on the levels of oxytocin in women and found that with experimentally induced stress, levels of oxytocin substantially increase. This study is reliable as it's a collection of 17 studies totaling 516 participants. Furthermore, this is the most up-to-date research on oxytocin levels in women. However, it does lack some validity, being experimentally induced stress, not environmental. Oxytocin has been proven to reduce blood pressure and cortisol levels, cortisol being the hormone associated primarily with being stressed. However, before all the supporting evidence was found, Taylor et al. First coined this phenomenon as the tend and befriend, a stress response unique to women. Taylor states the following. This once again is supported by the action of Hanan in the case study, where she speaks to the patient's sister, asking what she would like to happen, demonstrating a tending characteristic to reduce stress and befriending to aid in this venture. Alternatively, in males, the dominant hormone testosterone interacts with oxytocin. The way in which it occurs causes the opposite behavioural responses to oxytocin. Oxytocin receptors are blocked by testosterone, and we know from studies that one of the target areas for both oxytocin and testosterone is the prefrontal cortex. This region of the brain is imperative for impulse control, self-regulation, and empathy. This reduced activity of the prefrontal cortex due to the blocked oxytocin receptors has been shown to lead to an aggressive behaviour. This is further supported by the triune brain theory, which states that your brain is divided into three main regions: the reptilian brain for basic survival functions, the paleomammalian that initiates the fight or flight response, and the neomammalian brain for higher level conscious activity. According to this theory, in times of stress, the brain relates back to the paleomammalian brain over the neomammalian brain, and the prefrontal cortex is located in the latter. Therefore, rational thought is inhibited and a more primal response of aggression is exhibited. We can infer from this a possible explanation for why Peter is aggressive and short with Hanan.
In conclusion, there are many incidences in this case study where gender bias was prevalent, including the interactions between the clinical team leader and the women in the room, the culture Hanan may have grown up in, and biological factors that may have enhanced bias. However, we cannot conclude that this was the sole factor, as there are many human factors that contribute to all choices and their outcomes, including many decisions that were made in this case study. For future practice, we can recommend that women are given equal developmental opportunity that will improve prospects for promotion. Also, by having conversations around gender bias, we can break down the stigma associated with it and begin to break down boundaries that keep bias in place. Thank you for watching, and here are our references.